Welcome to Dead Time with your host, Holly Faust. Okay, hi everybody. We're back with another episode of Dead Time Tales. Today, we're going to be stepping a little bit beyond the world of the paranormal, and we're going to be bringing you something a bit different for us. We're going to be delving into the metaphysical a little bit with tonight's episode, and tonight's guest is Sami Brittany. Sami Brittany is a past life regressionist and an intuitive guide who's worked with over 100 clients since beginning her journey in 2018. Her work explores the depths of the subconscious mind using past life regression as a tool for self discovery, healing, and transformation. Through guided hypnosis, she helps people uncover life lessons with the help of understanding personal archetypes and revealing how past experience, whether from our childhood, our subconscious, and even from our previous lives, shapes our current realities. Her approach is deeply connected to intuition, shadow work, and personal growth, empowering clients to embrace hidden strengths and face unresolved emotions with confidence and clarity. This kind of subconscious work bridges the gap between psychology and the paranormal, offering insight into unseen connections that weave through our life experiences. Sami Brittany is a passionate about helping people trust their inner wisdom and believes that past life regression is more than just a glimpse into the past. It serves as a window to more deeply understanding ourselves through emotional healing and personal evolution. So, everybody, let's welcome in Sami Brittany. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Holly. So good to chat
I,
with you again.
and I am so excited because, I delve a lot into the paranormal and, mostly paranormal, true crime, things like that. This is like the metaphysical is something I love. Being a non-religious witch, it's something that I, have an affinity for. So I was so excited when you said you wanted to come on and talk about past life regression. Now, if you can you just like explain a little bit, because I know some of the people in that follow us wouldn't actually may not know what a past life regression is.
Sure. So I like to kind of express it as it's really in between a meditation and sort of a dream that you're aware of as it's going on, and you're able to discuss it and describe what's happening. Now, what's different for each individual person is that some people are really visual. They'll get and this is like you said, really related to being psychic and having psychic abilities. Everybody expresses them differently. So whether you hear voices or see things or feel things emotionally or physically, that's all also very different when you're talking about past life regression and when you're talking about exploring the subconscious and the way that the subconscious communicates with us as individuals. So for the similarities, it really is like a very relaxing trance state. It's meditation, hypnosis, hypnotherapy, those kinds of words that we're all familiar with. But the differences for each individual as they're going through their own subconscious is I couldn't even describe all the differences because it's as individual as all of our lives is, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Now now the one question, like when you say hypnosis,
Mhm.
now for someone like me, would a past life regression work? Because I cannot be hypnotized. I have had multiple hypnotherapists attempt with me, and I actually had one give me my money back because they were like, you can't, no matter what they've done with me, I haven't been able to get into that hypnotic state.
Yeah, so the relaxation state is a very deeply important part of it. But I haven't personally had anybody that hasn't been able to get somewhere
Okay,
in the
that's good to
from
know.
mhm,
I always
from
ask that because so many people talk about hypnosis, and there is like a small group of us.
mhm.
I don't know if it's because we just have such walls up to protect our psyche that we can't go into hypnosis at like that hypnotic state. Like, and I don't know if it could be my traumatic brain injury either. Like we delved with both of those when I worked with a psychologist before with hypnosis, and we don't know. But I know my psychic work, yeah, most people's psychic work takes place in one level of the brain. Mine takes place in the exact opposite level of the brain.
Oh, interesting, okay.
Yeah,
But yeah,
which we
I
never
would
knew
think
that.
that you trying to go into a hypnotic state or into a meditative state, that whatever it is that you generally feel? Like, I know that you work with spirits, so sometimes when
Yep.
spirits come to you, how do those come? Do those come as, like, feelings or visions
It
or
could be a multitude of ways. Like for me as a psychic and as a medium, I can see them. I can smell them. Most times they don't even look like a spirit to me. They look like a person. I can hear them, and a lot of times too, it's really weird because when I dream, I don't see my dreams. It's
Mhm.
act like a play playing out my head where I can hear it, like I'm listening to an audible book.
Yeah, that's
I
see, that's very interesting. So that's probably where I would focus if you and I were to try and go into opening up to your subconscious. I would say don't try and visualize because that's going to stunt you further. Because if you are more naturally picking up on sounds and hearing words, and sometimes people hear lyrics, stories,
Mhm,
like whatever it is that's coming most natural to you is what you should really follow into that flow. So even though that experience isn't the same for everybody, where they might not walk into a room and see carpet and see walls and things. They might walk into a room mentally and like you
mhm.
said, I'm hearing information, I'm picking up on like it's cold in here or the floor is made of stone or I can feel grass beneath my feet. I think one really interesting example that I like to give is I worked with someone once who had limited vision
Mhm.
and limited hearing. And it was very interesting working with them because they described things so differently than a lot of visual people, and I'm a very visual person myself, so I like to describe mine as still images. So
Right.
there's people that go in there and they're like, "I'm inside of this video game, I'm in this movie, everything that's happening around me feels really real." For me, it's more like looking at a flat picture and then
Okay.
emotional information comes in. For other people, there's no visions, there's no emotional information, it's just I'm hearing my thoughts that are giving me wisdom, that are giving me answers to the questions that I'm asking.
Okay.
And in that way, it's all relevant to us. It's
Right.
all connecting with us deeper because it's speaking to us in our own language.
Okay, I kinda get it now, like, because when I became a Reiki master teacher, I remember that session, I didn't have visions, but I remember, my master teacher working on me in a session, and I heard a door open in the room, and I heard someone walk in, and I went through this, like, all these different feelings and emotions, and then I heard, like, the person walk out, the door closed, and the session was over. So I find that interesting how they kinda, like, parallel each other and how they can be, how people perceive. Because,
Yeah.
like, I tell people all the time, when I have visions or messages that are given to me in the psychic realm, it's never like me there was only one time that I ever saw something, and that was, like, I think my psyche trying to say, "This is important, this needs," and
Mhm.
it was, someone I was very close to who had an addiction, and I saw them lying dead in a
Mm.
ditch. That was the only time I ever really saw anything of major, no other time, like, I dream and I don't remember them.
Mhm.
So, I know if I remember them, there's a reason behind
Yeah.
remembering a dream, so I
Well,
always write
especially when
them
they
down.
come to you in those different ways, like, this is not
Mhm.
your usual I like to call them like a modality, whether it's
Right.
audio, visual, kinesthetic, like, when it comes to you in a different way, it's a little bit more jarring and rememberable. Rememberable, I'm just making up words for you now.
That's okay, I make up words all the time. You should hear some of them that I make up. I have them on cups. So, and then I find it interesting because when you were saying it's not just about our past life, but it could be also about, like, our subconscious, and,
Mhm,
I've never heard that before, like, I've worked with people, in past life realms, and it's been a lot different than the way I've heard you describe yours, and are there different ways that people can go through this past life journey? Because I know they say some kids just know from the beginning.
yes, that was the most fascinating part when I started, was to learn that there were millions of people across the world that did remember their past lives when they were younger. I never knew that until I was older. But, could you repeat your question? Because now I'm just spitting
Oh, no,
around.
you're fine. I was just wondering, is there different ways that people, can do past life regression?
Oh,
Is
yeah, that's what it was. So, my experience was that although the intention a lot of the times was to guide people towards what would be in the past, if I allowed enough freedom for them to go wherever it was that they needed to go, they didn't necessarily go backwards. Sometimes the lessons or the stories that we need to hear the most are not about what we've done in the past. It's just again different for every individual. Maybe this person already learned enough from their past lives and it's something that they're dealing with in this life, or maybe the story of something that's going to happen in a future life or a parallel of this life and what could have been is just a better presentation and a better, like I said, jarring of let me pay more attention to this and focus on this because something about that story resonated with me so deeply that it feels like it was told to me on purpose. It really feels like when you've come out of a past life regression session that you've just had this dream that gave you a lot of insight. And most people
I
will
like that.
take a few hours off when we're done at the end just to try and process, take notes, drink a lot of water, and have a self care day because if you've ever been over flooded with like intuitive messages, or probably even when you come back from a paranormal investigation, all that energy that was like happening at that time just drains you.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you got to go get refreshed. You got to
Like,
eat some food, take a nap, just drink some water.
so it's like, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I go to a metaphysical conference a lot, and we always call it con crash.
Hmm.
Like the day or so when you come back, you're like, oh. And but it's just something that fascinates me because like even like the concept of like I do a lot of researching into like what people call like the multiverse. And I like how you're not saying this is something that's linear, like because you can
Hmm.
tap into your future selves and your past selves. And it just shows us that time truly isn't this linear thing that people think it is. And that's something I think we're just beginning to understand the concept of in the paranormal, because we've talked about like, maybe not everything we're experiencing are spirits of people who have died, but are possibly, alternative universes. Like, as someone that follows very Celtically, and I'm a big person with the Fae. Like, we believe that the Fae exist, at the same time as we do, but just in another dimension. And so I find that interesting when you said,
Hmm.
future self, because I don't think many people realize that they can tap into their future selves. And maybe it's a lesson that their future self learned that they need for now.
Mhm. Yeah, and that counts both as future self for, like, us 20 years older or whatever, as well as future selves as, other lives, like, in the
Hmm.
future, where we don't go back. Because, like you said, I do believe very much that the multiverse theory and that time is more of a on top of each other
Right.
than it is a line.
And
So
it took me a
it
long
makes a lot of
time to
sense.
believe that. Yeah. That, as a paranormal investigator, I never looked at that before as something that existed. Like, I've been investigating the paranormal for 30 years, and it's just been in like the last, I would say, 7 it's when I really started getting involved with my best friend, and she would talk about quantum physics and all
Mhm.
these quantum things, and I was never that type of person. I was just like, "Science, eh." I'll do biology and stuff like that, but when it comes to this, like, physics and it
Mhm.
just didn't compute with my brain because of math. So to hear other people now that are like saying, "Oh yeah, we don't have," and especially in the paranormal, because for so long it was always, "Oh, these people are dead. Yeah, they're dead people." And I'm like, "But are they really?" And the more I started learning about these alternative realities, and I think my child is the one that really pushes me, because they said, somewhere there is a reality where, I had my Chiari when I was 2 and I died. And I'm like, "I don't wanna hear that." But she said, "But it is an alternative reality that could somewhere out
Mhm.
there, that's what happened." And I'm like, "Okay, well, there's a reality that, my brother and sister put me under a Christmas tree when I was first born, and I died instead of spending months in an oxygen tent. So, you guys never existed." And it's just, those theories never, and does that have a lot to do with with this past life stuff too? Are you finding a lot more people are tapping into these like alternative realities even?
I wouldn't say a lot. Again, it's very individual because when people are looking for past life regression, they're usually also looking to move themselves forward in some way. Or
Mhm.
they're seeking clarity. They want to know themselves better. They want to understand their life purpose. So it's really a such a personal journey, and it's however that information is going to make the most impact on that person, which I wanted to take myself out of the equation. I wanted to take just moving in a line out of the equation. I wanted to say, like, where can we go with this? And whatever the impactful message is that the subconscious has waiting for you, let's just go find it. Whether it's past, present, future, completely made up. Some people honestly have gone through and seen nothing but colors. And you would think that would be a boring session, but it wasn't. It was sessions filled with tears and healing, and and all they did was, like, notice different colors coming up and talk through the feelings that were coming up in their body as that was making sense to them. But others have gone like my own first past life regression. I went in as a skeptic, by the way. When I got my first past life regression, I was like, "This is very strange," but all of my friends have been mentioning this, and as something that has physically and mentally and spiritually healed them in
Mhm.
miraculous ways that caught my attention. So I said, I want to go figure out what this is about. I want to understand it more for myself because I'm seeing something here that I don't understand and I want to understand it. So I went, and my very first session was, again, I still only saw still pictures. Like, it wasn't jumping into a movie or fully in a dream. It was these faces and places that would pop up, and information would come in really emotionally for me because that's just how I process information is through emotion.
Mhm.
And I learned about an entire life, one life from like middle age till death. And that was my first experience when I started learning as well. It was quantum healing hypnosis technique was the first one that I picked up. And they do it very linear. They want to take you to a past life, and they want that past life to go from sort of like the beginning or middle all the way up to the death scene. And then you go
Mhm.
to speak with your subconscious to answer specific questions that you brought with you. So that was
Okay.
my first experience, and that was the kind of like setup and how you did it.
Yeah,
And
that
then that
sounds
was
more
when I started.
familiar to me.
Hmm?
That
It sounds
sounds
more
more
familiar?
familiar to me, yeah, to me
Yeah.
than what I've heard you explain, which I love the differences, that there can be differences just like in anything else. We don't have to have everything the same.
Yes, because then I started, picking up on life between lives, and that's a different methodology.
Mhm.
And they speak more directly to your spirit team, to your higher self,
Mhm.
and just other beings that are around helping you and guiding you and being there renewing your energy and spirit as you work. And I loved the blend of that. I also love that even while doing those quantum healing sessions, people pop up, which is really interesting. People's passed on grandmothers or passed on pets or loved ones who they've been separated from through death. They pop up and they have chats. Like, I'm really just an observer, and that's my favorite part is that I'm just there to ask questions. And when people say like thank you or something at the end, all I did was ask annoying questions, but you're welcome. I
Well,
just
that's what
sat here
kind of
and
like when
quizzed
you're
you
me.
for an hour.
Yeah, it sounds like, when I'm a medium, I always tell people it's not me.
Mhm.
It's spirit speaking through me.
Mhm.
But
And there
I mean,
have been
I'm
times when.
fascinated by it all. So I just
Mhm.
think, for me, I because I know I was told eons ago by someone that I was very close to in the metaphysical community. I have like hyper anxiety. Like, I mean, you
Mhm.
know this. You've witnessed me like just driving to where you guys are. I was like dying because I had to go down hills in the car by myself.
Yeah.
And I was paranoid to go home. And, we had discussed this, and they honestly felt that it was, my lives have been so far apart that this spirit was hanging on to this one with every ounce of energy and made me have these obsessive fears because it was afraid of dying again because it took so
Mhm.
long to come back around. And as I got more involved in the metaphysical community, I found out, hey, that's kind of true because, my last existence was like before, this country was founded. So it's going back hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So I can kind of understand that. Now, have you yourself, because I'm very interested about this because you mentioned something to me. I'm pretty sure, or I seen it on one of the videos that I have that about your past lives that you've experienced so far, because you said you have a story that kind of goes in with one of my other interviews. So
Oh,
I'd be
really?
interested.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
I was watching your,
my
oh, I wrote his
Gettysburg,
name down.
Andy
That you
Andrews.
Andy, yeah.
Yes.
And it was just interesting because I was like, "Let me go watch some of these podcasts so I know what to expect," and I that was the one that I happened to pop on, and you guys were talking about Gettysburg,
Oh yeah.
and I have worked with someone who, had a lot of draws to Gettysburg. She loves to go there and take pictures and do the history tours, and she just feels very drawn to that specific area.
Yep. I'm the
And
same
so
way.
when we went through her past life regression, it wasn't specifically Gettysburg, but there was a layer of her story that was very similar to what someone, in a battlefield might have felt. And so without oversharing, she was going through basically she was a father
Hmm.
on a farm and uh what do you call it? Her son got drafted,
Hmm.
her slash him in that past life. Um And that was what a lot of our session was going through was this man whose son was being drafted and his worry, his pain, his fear, and I remember the description of cannons and like lines of soldiers moving through their property. And so again, it wasn't very specifically Gettysburg when we went back,
Right.
but I could see how those kinds of stories and those kinds of like emotional attachments would make a lot
Hmm.
of sense to pull towards an area like that.
Oh, totally. I agree because I have several people that I'm friends with that I've met through the paranormal community that have had past life experiences where they were soldiers
Mhm.
and they are now reenactors. A few of them were in Gettysburg and, they do Civil War reenacting now. And I think it's healing that part of them. That's my
Yes,
personal view of it, that it's doing some healing to that part of them that, couldn't comprehend what they were going through at the time.
because they don't even realize that they're reenacting not
Right.
only what has happened in our history, but what perhaps has happened in their ancient psyche,
Right. Yeah.
in their
And,
soul.
and that, and that's why, like, I, I think there is a cross between that paranormal aspect of it with past lives, because I think some of us have these experiences from our past lives that we're trying to deal with and we don't
Mhm.
know how to deal with them, so we get into these paranormal explorations or investigations. And I always tell
Patterns.
people, yeah, pay
We get
attention,
into these patterns.
because I here's the thing that I've noticed about myself, that I love battlefields
Mhm.
and insane asylums. Anybody who knows me will tell you I fit right in at the
Mhm.
asylums, but I also hate prisons. I've gone to, like, a couple of, like, West Virginia penitentiary and places like that, but I do not, and, it's something that I'm exploring, in my
Mhm.
journey. Is there a reason why I like certain places and really but I keep going back to the prisons,
Mhm.
even though I don't like them, I keep going back.
Yeah, like a moth to the flame, you're just
Yep.
drawn over and over in a pattern.
Mhm.
And I do think that's very touching to what we're kinda trying to get around the point of whatever it is that's happening within our soul is imprinted within us in this life, and so it causes us to go into these patterns that we don't always realize, these subconscious patterns, because the information that's stored deep within our subconscious has followed us through in universal consciousness to stay with us here now and express and learn and continue growing and evolving our soul. That's what I believe.
I agree with you. And that's why I wanted to bring you on too, because I don't think, like, so many people, like, when they hear, oh well, past lives, they think, well, that's a crock. And I hear it all the time, even within the we're paranormal investigators, we're supposed to believe in, most of these things. Why is that a crock? You talk to a little computer box and, spirits talk to you, but why does that have to mean it's a spirit from the past?
Well, and
Or
I do also
why
think that for some people that don't think about the linear, they're thinking like, "Well, how could ghosts exist and stay here and be haunting if we're also reincarnating? Like, how does that
Mhm.
work?" But I again, this is me for more the universal consciousness. When we're talking about energy fragments, if our subconscious is this big and our body is this big, then again, these fragments of our past life soul can be
Mhm.
left in pockets all over, and as well as what does continue to stay with us and what
Right.
does continue to be split among other people. Because the other thing that Dolores Cannon, who is the creator of the quantum healing hypnosis technique, she even talks about how sometimes we don't come in as just one person.
Mhm.
And I have a friend of my family who they truly believe that, like, they're the father and the daughter are sharing a soul. Like, they're the same soul, they're completely individual lives, but, like, they're just so similar in personality and in experience, and their patterns match so
Right.
well.
Now, would that be, like, similar to, like, a twin flame philosophy? Because
Mm,
I have, a very close friend of mine, and we, like, always say we're twin flames, but not
mhm,
in that romantic
mhm.
sense, but we experience and feel each other's sickness. And she's in Canada, and she will literally call me and say, "Hey, have you been sick?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" And she's like, "Well, this." Like, my daughter was literally going through brain surgery, and she collapsed in her office and literally felt them cutting into my daughter's skull.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I
And
don't know what to call it, and, like, twin flame is such a
it's such a
nuanced
negative
word term.
connotation. Right, and depending upon who you speak to, they're because
Right,
of the
yeah.
praise
I
that's
don't like,
surrounded
we're
it.
touching on what it is, like, we've discovered it, that's the thing, is that as
Right,
humans, we recognize that there is something beyond our human understanding that makes us more connected as individuals intuitively and spiritually than we are
to
able
other
to put
people.
words onto.
Right, and that's basically what her and I have always said. We're kinda like twin flames, but not that negative connotation of, the bad,
Yeah, or the romantic
the
connotation, because
right.
a lot of people do that
It's
as well.
right, it has nothing to do with that. It's that and when people ask us that, we literally say, "No, it's just here's what happens." We experience each other's pain. We experience each other. We know when something's going on with the other
Mhm.
person and we need to reach out. We might not talk to each other for months. And then all of a sudden, boom, I'm led to I need to call her right now. And,
Yep.
were we connected in a past life? I don't know. Are we the same piece of one soul? Possibly. Because when you think about it, like I read, through medical journals and whatnot, that we only like through magnetic, MRIs, magnetic resonant imaging, we only use a tiny portion of our brains. So there's so much of even conscious energy that we're not utilizing in this lifetime, and then you add the subconscious level onto that. Yeah, all these things are possible that we can be existing in multiple consciousness at the same
Yeah.
time. And
'Cause to
yeah,
me, the depth and the size of the subconscious would be unfathomable. Like, as big as bigger than the universe. Like, the universe would be included in universal consciousness, the oneness that connects us all. So
right,
when I talk about soul fragments, it's more like there's the oneness, which I can't even say oneness because oneness is omnipresent,
right,
but then we've got, like, all the humans on Earth are still in here, and then all of our friends are still in here, and then we're still in here, and it's all still connected.
hmm,
So I think that it's more like how close are we in these pockets?
right.
How
I
much we
always
resonate with each other.
I try to explain things in comic book my brain thinks in comic books. So
That's cool.
I always talk to people about like the multiverse of madness. And
Mhm,
when you look at like the last Loki series, and how all of that with the TVA and everything were like they were trying to keep to one timeline, and then Loki just blew it all up. And I
as he
think that's
would.
yes, of course, like, and everybody knows about me with Loki. And I that's how I look at it. Like we're thinking we have this one timeline, but if you look
Mhm,
at it, we have this timeline and this timeline and this timeline and this one, and there's a multitude. Like when I don't know if you've seen any or read any of the comics, but I'm obsessed with comics. And when you watch like this Loki TV series, it went from this one timeline that was like kind of controlled in the narrative that they wanted, and
mhm,
then when he busted it all up, they're just all these lights that just seem to start lighting up everywhere, and all these other alternatives within this what they term a multiverse. So when I hear multiverse, that's what I think of, because that's where my ADHD brain goes to.
No, it's a great way to try and think about it. It's so hard to think about it visually because it's not a 3D concept.
Right.
It's something that we can't fathom.
Right,
We're
and
just
that's
trying to understand it from the knowledge that we have and the sensory processing that we have.
oh, yeah, totally, and I don't have any sensory processing, so my brain goes millions of miles, and, I but with like, I'm still, holding on to that concept where you said, past selves and not just, well, not past selves, but future selves.
Mhm.
And not just, a future self from this plane of existence, but maybe a future self from another lifetime. I'm just thinking, man, I want to experience that. I want a message from my future self. So that's going to be my new goal.
And that's a really funny point too, because so many people are like, "Well, I can't wait to go into my past life and find out that I was the king of France or something," and it's never been that interesting, like, honestly, and everybody that I've worked with, pretty much everybody was just like, "I don't even really know what my name was," like, I was just somebody doing something with my family or my work or it's all very humble. It's not like famous people
Well,
or
yeah, because how many people can truly be like, a
Mhm,
king or a queen or, like I've heard people say like Joan of Arc. They were one person, and I mean, could they have been other multiple people? Maybe. I mean, it's not my
probably.
job to say no.
Maybe we've all passed through being Marie Antoinette once or twice, who knows?
Right?
But
Who knows?
is it
But
relevant to what I'm doing in my current life and the lessons that I'm here to learn?
right, and that's what I think, like, a lot of people don't realize when it comes to doing past life work. Now, there was one thing that I was really intrigued about when I was reading, like, the information that you sent, like, how does shadow work play into a past life regression?
So my thoughts on shadow work are that it's really about looking into the dark corners of your soul and
Mhm,
understanding who you are, even when it's not who you strive to be or like the parts that you accept and love about yourself. It's about understanding your darkness, your humanity.
mhm,
And I think that again, this is one of those looking glasses that you can kind of see behind the curtain and see like these are the parts of myself that I haven't really recognized yet. These are parts of myself that I haven't embraced or embodied. And that's again, those are more questions that I like to ask because before I start a session, I love to have people write down questions that they want to know about themselves and like what their goals are, what the reason that they're like trying to forward their life right now is, because that's the kind of people that I prefer to work with. So I like to work with somebody that has a mission in mind and has a journey and a path that they're attempting to commit to. So we're framing some of these questions deliberately to find out more about themselves, to find out more about their purpose and their talents and their skills. And in order to do that, you have to be able to face what your weaknesses are. You have to be able to face what your challenges are in order to see the barrier or the hurdle that you have to
mhm.
jump. So we're shining a light on, maybe I don't always want to be the trickster Loki vibe, but every once in a while I pull that out because I'm the person in my friend group that's going to challenge my friends and ask them the hard questions. And although it's not necessarily a bad thing, it can be a frustrating thing that people don't like and that people will not everybody wants the mirror held up
Right.
to them.
Yeah, and
So you're not always the good guy when you've got the mirror in your
well, and
hands.
that I find interesting because I think, like, if I'm getting it right, people are looking to do, like, self-betterment when they're looking
Mhm.
to do these regressions. Like, I mean, does it help with, like, other things like depression or anxiety? Or because 'cause I'd be all in if I could find something that could help my anxiety, man.
Well, the thing about anxiety is that it's also building
Mhm,
confidence. So when if your confidence overrides your anxiety and you can find your skills and your talents and be confident and comfortable with who you are, then your anxieties feel smaller. So you're able to conquer the world more because you're more in touch with this is who I am and this is what I want and this is where I'm
mhm.
going. And here are maybe some things that I don't need anymore because it's not in line with the path that I want to take
That's
forward.
interesting. It's really, um I'm just fascinated by it all. And now can you kind of, so that people that are, listening or watching can kind of understand how like a basic session would go. So like if they came in, like how what they would experience. So, it doesn't have to be like a complete experience, but like how things
Yeah.
would go through the session.
So, and again, it's going to be different for working with somebody that's not me specifically. It's probably different for every
Right.
practitioner. But I like to, like I said, before I meet with somebody, I've got them listing out questions for themselves. Like, what is it that you want to know about
Mhm.
yourself? What do you want to discover? Are there challenges that you're currently facing that you've been struggling with for a while? Patterns in your life that you've been repeating that you're ready to just end that cycle? Um, so they'll come with a list of questions and a list of
Mhm.
intentions of what they want to accomplish with this session. And then we'll kind of discuss all of that so that I have a better understanding. And I honestly usually get them to do what I like to call a cast list because I like to think about characters and archetypes. So before we go into their past life, I get to know just a little bit about who the main characters in their life
Mhm.
are, whether it's your family and the people that brought you up or the person that you've been in love with for 20 years that you're either with or not with. Um, and then so I write their names down for myself so that as we're in there, if they're mentioning names from their current life, I don't have to stop them and be like, "Who is
Okay.
that? Give me more context." So I'll have like just little notes that I'll give them back at the end. I don't keep them, but that way, when we're going through, I'm guiding them into that relaxing
Mhm.
place, that trance space, so that they can start figuring out whether it's their pictures or their sounds or their emotional feedback that they're going to let me know what they're seeing, feeling, hearing as far as so like let's take mine for example. Mine was pictures. So when I first went in, I was seeing green fields rolling and I kind of zoomed in and the more that we focus on what's happening, the clearer it becomes. So as a scene is building, whether it's I can feel grass beneath my feet or I see a large red barn in front of me, um, I start asking questions like, what do you see? What do you feel? What do you hear? And then we're exploring all of that. And then it, in a way, the way that a metaphor and a story work, as we're going through and the story's being told, we're starting to understand it. So it really is something that you're not going to understand until you've completely like, all right, I see the story's in front of me. Now let's break it down into smaller pieces and be like, well, this is someone who's struggling financially, or this is someone who's struggling fighting with a partner or not fitting in with their community. Mine, for example, when I first started my past life regression, I was in isolation. I lived in a small hut. So that was one of the first things I saw as I rolled down these green fields was this little tiny hut and there was really nothing else around. So gathering as that story continued to progress and more details became apparent, that's what we were picking up on was, oh, this is someone who lives in isolation. This is someone who decided that they wanted to be outside of a community and outside of the town and the hustle. There were roads and there was a market where I found a map and I remember the map coming up in my mind and it being so vividly clear that I can still see it to this day. My past life regression was like 9 years ago.
Oh, wow.
But I still remember what that map looked like. Um, so my character or my past life, however you choose to call that, um, they were moving from this place where they were in isolation and then they went to a large town. And I remember as I'm processing this dream or subconscious expression, the very distinct difference between how it felt in my session while I was in isolation in this hut in the forest and calm and peaceful and connected to earth and then went over to this like hustle bustle city loud lots of things going on and like even in my session I'm like oh yeah this is really overstimulating. And that's I do resonate with that so much for my personal life because I am very much the balance between wanting to hermit myself and be a, like a little bit more isolated and quiet and trying to be involved in the community and stay on top of things while being a highly sensitive person and feeling very overwhelmed by stimulus in the environment. So, and it could be different for everyone. So, whether they were um, a young person when they first started their past life regression and then they grew into an older person, and then one of the biggest things that we like to do, or I still like to do, because that's what they did in quantum healing hypnosis, was go through that death scene. And a lot of people are intimidated by the death scene because who wants to face death so really and so upfront? But the death scene is very cathartic because as your spirit is deconnecting from the body, you're really looking back down and you get that third person view. You get
Mhm.
that ability to look at your life and be like, what was the purpose of that? What was the story? Like we put all these parts together. I was isolated and alone. I decided to move and then went to the city, and there's so many details of mine I'm leaving out just for simplicity's sake. But
Mhm.
just trying to look through the lens of like what just happened and what does that story tell us about that character? How does that character relate to me as a person in my current life? And is that something that I want to continue to embody? Is it something that I want to change? Is that something that I want to strive towards? And it's again different for everybody, how they resonate with
Mhm.
that story, how it relates to what they want, how it relates to their goals. Um, so you'll sit through what will be some sort of journey, whether it's audio, hearing yourself, or swimming through colors and feeling feelings, or literally like this was a person and he lived for this long and had this much family and lived in this place. Like some people get really specific details and other people get colors. Um, and there's no way for me to know whether or not you're going to get colors or really specific details, but the goal is always for me more emotional growth. So as long as
Right.
we have the session feeling like you feel confident and empowered and you've gotten clarity and you've gotten the answers to your questions and you've met the intentions that you've set out for yourself, then we've achieved a good session. And so then after that, we kind of like reassimilate because most people will feel as if time has gone very quickly. So even if I've done a 2 hour hypnosis, 2 hours in trance,
Right.
um, they'll wake up and be like, it feels like it's only been 20 minutes. So I have to be like, it's 3:30 in the afternoon. And then we kind of discuss it from awake and like, what do you remember? Because depending on how deep people go into hypnosis, if you've entered like the somnambulistic state, some people don't even remember what we like. It's like literally waking up from a dream. You might remember parts of it now, you might remember parts of it later. The bigger picture might come back together later. But then the best part is that I will be taking my own notes, which I like to give people when they leave, just because I'm like, I'm not taking weird notes on you. This is for you.
Mhm.
um, and the recording. So I will record the session and then they get to go back and listen to everything that we talked about. And I remember listening to my session again and I probably remembered 50-ish% of it. Like I remembered some, but not all of it. And I've listened to it a few times since then because every time I pick up on something else that I was like, oh my gosh, this feels like this is really related to a challenge that I was facing last month that I hadn't even thought about, wouldn't have connected if I hadn't re-listened to this. So it's very different for everybody. It's really hard to explain. I can
I
go on
I yeah,
for
and that's
hours.
why I just wanted, like, like, the basics for people, like,
Yeah,
like,
it's
as someone who does Reiki, I'm
yeah,
always like, "Well, this is what you could experience,
mhm,
and this is what your session may be like," because some people do have psychic visions during Reiki sessions, and I know, like, a lot of these metaphysical modalities, people do have these experiences, and sometimes they don't remember them.
yeah, mhm,
And, some people don't even know what to expect. I know so many people who have wanted to do these things that are like, but I'm so afraid, like, what's going to
mhm,
happen? And are they going to like the biggest one? And I think that comes back from a fear from like the 80s and 90s where people were undergoing hypnosis and having
yeah,
false thoughts planted in them.
mhm,
And because I know that's what my fear was. And sometimes I wonder why maybe that's the reason why I can't get into that hypnotic state, but I can meditate.
mhm,
I can sit here and my husband says I can meditate all day because I get into this trance state where I hear nothing or see anything around me. Like people will be talking to me and I don't even realize it. I'm just off. And so I can get into that state, but I've never been able to obtain that state with another person
Mhm.
leading it. So I don't know if it's just that I have those walls up, and like that's something that I'm working on trying to break down, because I do want to go through
Yeah.
and see exactly, what messages I could get, because I think that there are things that I need to learn and that I need to grow, because I feel like, I struggle with different issues, and I think, experiencing this different level of, a spiritual enlightenment would be beneficial for me.
And I think you're right when you're talking about feeling blocked, feeling scared, because that is a
Mhm.
block. It is one struggle that people go through in order to tap into that trance state, is breaking that bridge between allowing yourself to go deep,
Mhm.
allowing yourself to feel completely relaxed. And it is much more difficult when you're sitting in a room with what might be a stranger to some people.
Right.
Because my first past life regression was with a complete stranger. Um, and I didn't think I was going to go very deep. I really didn't. I remember being very aware the entire time. Probably the craziest thing was my stomach was going crazy. You could actually hear my stomach growling on my recording. It was just like bubbling and churning.
Well, as paranormal investigators, we're used to that, because
Yeah,
that tends
that
to
was
be
my
when
first
ours go.
experience with that. I was like,
Yeah.
"I don't know what's going on. I feel so embarrassed right now," and it was so distracting, like, it was just another way for my body to try and sabotage me from getting to that deep level. Like, I was,
Mhm.
like, so afraid my body was like, "No, I
Oh, yeah.
can't."
And it's common, because I know as investigators, and I'm sure any investigator will tell you this, when you're recording and doing EVP sessions, you'll literally hear stomach. Because we always say when there's a noise and you can explain it, just say it so people know. Stomach. I ate
Oh, yeah.
tacos last night. You know, those are the things that,
I
we
like the
hear.
specifics.
Yeah. I ate
Sorry,
tacos
it's
last
possible.
night, and I like, so I can understand why that would happen.
Mhm,
You're in this, like, because when we're doing an EVP session, it's kind of like a meditation. We're
mhm.
focusing on what entities or spirits can be in that environment and communicating with them. And it seems like when everything gets really quiet and you're focusing on that, you hear, their
Yeah.
stomach.
Better explain that one.
Yeah, stomach.
Strange
Yeah,
growling.
yeah, it's like and it's a constant. Like, I just did an investigation a couple of weeks back, and literally I can hear myself on my recording. Stomach. That was my stomach. Yeah. Oh, that was my stomach again. Yeah.
And then you just wanna be like, "Shh, come on."
Yeah. And I never had that experience before, but I had gastric surgery back in May. So now I have,
Mm.
a stomach that works. So now it makes all kinds of noises. And I'm just like, man, now I know what these poor people felt like before, when I used to laugh at them. My stomach doesn't make those noises.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so
I
don't feel bad about that, because you were doing something, that type of work. And, yeah, it, like you said, it could just be another block to your body just saying, no, I don't want you to do that.
yeah.
But yeah, it's
I was
remarkable.
gonna say, um, we were talking about the Gettysburg,
Yes.
and one of the coolest things I think is the people who have an intuition, like I was talking about
Hmm.
the lady who takes pictures and things in Gettysburg,
Right.
she had that. She was very wondering when she came for a past life regression, like, "Is this something that I'm going to find ties to?" And I do find that whether or not it's the exact correlation of the literal Gettysburg field, or if you're attracted to New York and you've never been to New York, or if you're attracted to certain places of the world that you've never been to, or you know cultural iconic things that you wouldn't normally be aware of, and you're just like, I don't know why I'm so obsessed with this, like it has nothing to do with anything in my personal life. And the people who come in with those kinds of questions do often find, like, if you are obsessed with Rome and Roman culture and like the war that was in Rome. I don't know much about it.
Right.
But I had somebody come in with something like that as well, and they did. They saw themselves in Roman garb and Roman gear. Like, they weren't like Caesar or anything, but they were
They
in
were
there
from that
wearing
time period.
the colors that they recognize and the places and times that feel most relevant to them, they often
Mhm.
come up. And the other thing that would come up is phobias. Phobias come up a lot. The one girl
That's
we
me.
talked about how she had automobile phobia for like she basically never learned to drive because she's been terrified of cars.
Mhm.
And nothing had ever happened to her in this life that should have made her afraid of cars. So we went into her past life regression and I'd kind of already forgotten that she mentioned it because it was just like this tiny little like, "Oh yeah, I don't drive because blah blah blah." And it wasn't like part of the session at all. It's just the thing that she mentioned. And so I remember that while she was telling me what was happening, she was saying that she had a husband and 2 children, and she was like, "Oh, we're getting in the car." And as soon as she said they were getting in the car, I was like, "Oh no." And it went exactly where you think it would have gone. That husband, wife, and 2 children all passed away in that car in her vision, in her
Mhm.
past life regression session. And we talked through it. She cried in the session. I cried on the sideline. And it was something that I don't know, I haven't really followed up with her, but she did say that she would think a lot more about whether or not she wanted to drive when she was done, and again, it was not actually part of her intentions, it was
Right.
not part of her questions, it was just a phobia that came up while we were working.
And I find that interesting because I have so many phobias, but some of them are related to this lifetime that
Mhm.
I wonder
Yeah,
if they
which
have
makes sense
been
too.
exacerbated. But I wonder if they have been exacerbated
Mhm,
by a previous life or a future life or, something subconsciously that I, experiencing because I know they've gotten worse, through
mhm,
the last, I would say since COVID. Like, and I don't know if it was the isolation and the not going anywhere, and I became like more agoraphobic and but I know that it happened around that time and that it keeps, then I worked on it, I did exposure therapy with driving and I'm slowly getting better with that. But if I see snow
yeah,
or if I have to go out in the dark, I do like yesterday, I was coming home from an appointment. I was going out with my girlfriends to do garden planting and I had to cancel because it started snowing.
mhm,
And I'm called my husband up and I'm in a panic driving, trying to get to him, a half hour away because I didn't want to drive anymore.
mhm,
And I was just so scared. And, and I was in a car accident in the snow, but the fear, because I remember taking my kids to doctor's appointments in the snow, driving up the hill in front of my house sideways and not having that fear. But just the last 5, 6 years, that fear has been exacerbated. So I think that's another reason why I'm intrigued and interested because I
mhm.
wanna do that work. And sometimes I wonder though who I would bring through in with me. Like, would it be me or would it be, someone else? Because I do work so closely with other beings and other entities. So, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and like I said, I have experienced people who have visitors, whether they're loved ones or actually started writing notes because there were, I guess, what some people refer to as shadow people, or at least this is
Mhm,
what the one girl was calling this shadow figure.
mhm.
Um, and but she was saying that it wasn't feeling like there was no feeling attached to it. There was no fear. There was no like
Right,
anger, there was no, like, anything. It was just a neutral fact that this shadow was here, and I was like, "Alright, well, then let's address this shadow, because it's obviously distracting us from what we're trying to do here, so let's figure out what it is."
right.
And it was, according to her, some person that she didn't know that was needing to be told that they could move on, that they could go towards the light.
And that's
And I just
interesting.
kinda sat back and let this person work through that because I didn't have any experience with that myself. This was just something that they were telling me was happening, and I was like,
Right.
"Well, we've gotta face it. Let's figure it out."
Well, and that's interesting because as an investigator, getting into the paranormal side of things, like my son, when he started experiencing things psychically,
Mhm,
he couldn't see people. He saw shadows. He
mhm,
called them black men. And that's what he would say. And I met, someone who was very prominent in the paranormal field who helped me to say, people who are getting very young in their psychic journeys, they can't decipher. So they only see shadows.
mhm.
So I find that interesting when you said it was someone that just needed, and to me that gives me the, ooh, that person was probably very young in psychic abilities and didn't realize
Mhm.
that they had these abilities, and that thing, came through because they needed to say goodbye, go.
And it is, a lot of people who are drawn to this kind of experience are people who
Mhm.
are very psychic, medium, spiritual, who have those questions and are already open and in tune and tapped in. So, it didn't happen a lot, like, I'd say maybe 3 times, but that was the one I remember the most, and it being very, neutral, very, like, "This doesn't have much to do with me, but, like, let" and it does, though, like, it has a lot to do with, um, her abilities and her processing and her journey forward, like, what she wanted to do with her goals,
Right.
um, but it wasn't very personal in the way that it was, like, she knew what the shadows like, she didn't have empathy or, like, I'm sure she had the empathy, but I'm saying, like, she didn't.
Have a physical connection or
Right,
a
there wasn't,
spiritual
like, a huge
connection to it.
story behind it or, like, "They came to me specifically because of this," like, it was just,
Right. And a lot of times that's how it is, because
learning how to do it, I guess.
I posted on my social media at times, like, by the way, I have this person, named John that showed up, and he just
Mhm.
keeps whistling Dixie. Who does he belong to? Because he's
Yeah,
not mine. He's not mine. So, and that happens a lot. I have no connection. I don't know what this person wants, but they obviously have a message for someone. And until I find there's someone, they're just gonna
yeah.
keep standing over me whistling Dixie. Yeah.
Yeah.
uh,
Well, and I guess I would also mention that during my setup, even before they arrive, really, I'm calling in my own personal light protection. I'm setting up my wards and my shields and holding that space and creating safe space so that
mhm,
anything that is coming in is either neutral or good.
right.
We're not inviting anything in that's not part of us healing and growing and evolving. So I haven't had any interruptions from anything that was unwelcome.
Well, and that's good
The
because that
interruptions
shows
that we
that
have
you're
aren't even
setting that
interruptions,
up,
they're usually just a part of the story in some way.
and that's awesome. Well, I'm almost ready to close out for the night. So, can you share information on where people can find you?
Yeah, I'm all over Facebook,
Yeah,
so I have
same as me.
Exploring Insight with Sami Brittany, Exploring Art and Intuition on Facebook, and the Mystically Minded group on Facebook. I've been sharing a lot more in there, and I'm, of course, open and welcome to you guys sharing and bringing art and everything into that group for Central PA. So that's about it. Just
All
Exploring
right.
Insight and the Mystically Minded group.
And I will have those links in my description. So if you guys want to go check it out, and then you could hook up with Sammy. Sammy, I may be hooking up with you in the future once I get out of winter.
I hear ya.
I can and want to travel back south. That's a long drive for me, but it's also a scary drive because there's so many hills.
I hear
but
you. I do.
but yeah, and I definitely appreciate you coming on and talking about this, because does kind of steer away from what I usually focus on, but I do want to focus on some of these metaphysical types of subjects, because I do think it runs linear and coincides with the paranormal field. And so I was really excited for that. But I, like, again, I really want to thank you. And like I said, everybody, I'll have some descriptions and in the description, I'll have links where you can reach out to Sammy.
Thank you so
And
much, and thank you for dealing with all my tech problems. I
oh,
appreciate it so
hey,
much.
tech bunnies we're used to, but I will be right back, okay?
Okay.
From our friends at Got Knockers, Strange Knocks Magazine. Strange Knocks Magazine is your ultimate companion for exploring the enigmatic corners of our world. Delve into the shadows with us as we uncover the mysteries surrounding cryptids like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, and examine the tantalizing possibility of extraterrestrial life visiting Earth. Our pages are filled with compelling true crime stories that defy conventional explanation, alongside mind bending conspiracy theories that challenge the status quo. Whether you're a seasoned skeptic or a curious believer, Strange Knocks Magazine invites you to expand your horizons and entertain the unexplained. With captivating articles, expert interviews, and reader submissions, each issue promises to spark your imagination and thrill your sense of wonder. Join us in our quest to illuminate the unknown. one strange knock at a time. From our friends at Got Knockers Strange Knocks magazine. Read the description for further information. Be a Moss Healing Collective in Milton, Pennsylvania, your one stop shop for crystals, candles, herbs, books, divination tools, self care, and healing. Amos offers a multitude of classes for your metaphysical and witchy needs. Check them out on Broadway Street in Milton, Pennsylvania. Amos Healing Collective. Look for more information in the description.